would like, if I may, to take you on a strange journey.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. My name's Robert Whitelaw, and I am the Rebel Broker. Licensed real estate broker in the state of California, member of the National Association of Realtors. But please, don't hold that against me. If you'd like to reach out and get in contact with me, feel free to head on over to therebelbroker.com. From there, you can send along any ideas, suggestions, observations, or questions that you might have. If you'd prefer to reach out directly, you can just send those messages to therebel@therebelbroker.com. You can also join the Rebel Underground by texting the word Rebel Broker, all one word, to the number 44222. That's text the word Rebel Broker to the number 44222. Follow the prompts. It'll let you know you're connected to the right place. Send along the information it asks for, and you'll be in. And then, of course, while you're at the website, you can just scroll up to the very tippy top of the page. There's a red button titled Take the Survey to support the show. By participating, you'll be putting yourself into the drawing for a $50 Amazon gift card. We've already given out 2 such gift cards, so $100 so far, going out to listeners who've done me the favor of taking the survey. Thank you very much for that, and congratulations to the folks who've won. And we'll be doing that drawing, our next drawing, in December. So by jumping in, providing the same email address both times you're asked, and then answering the remaining questions, you submit yourself into the potential for winning that $50. So good luck to you, and thanks for supporting the show. Everyone who does that is absolutely helping the show out and helping the show grow, and I truly appreciate it. All right, folks. We oftentimes will, as we move through life and see different things going on out in the world, try to see how those things might influence real estate related things. And of course, one thing that's come up a lot with me has been keeping an eye on things relating to employment situations. And what's interesting is I came across an article just the other day that brings up a community that has come up a bunch on the show in terms of a great place to invest on all kinds of different levels, whether you're talking about multi-unit housing, whether you're talking about single-family residential rentals, or other lists that we've looked at in terms of great places to get access to a great variety of jobs, high-tech jobs, just in an area that is considered by most data that we've come across to be a boom town, but sort of bringing into contrast with that is this idea that they're financially in really big trouble right now. This one kind of blew me away. This is from the New York Times, and the headline is Dallas stares down a Texas-sized threat of bankruptcy. Now, this one is amazing because it's almost one of those, if it can happen here, where else can it happen? Particularly since the thing that is causing this problem is going to be an issue in most cities. So let's jump in and take a look at it and see if we can't understand what the kind of profound effect that this might have. In terms of cities that we would consider high probabilities for going bankrupt, I really don't think Dallas would be on anybody's top 10 list. Maybe Detroit, maybe Chicago, maybe some other places, but I sure wouldn't have thought, just anecdotally, from what we've learned here on this show, that Dallas was in trouble. Now, Dallas's mayor, Michael S. Rawlings, was testifying this month to a state oversight board that his city appeared to be, quote, walking into the fan blades of municipal bankruptcy. And he described it as horribly ironic. Dallas has the fastest economic growth of the nation's 13 largest cities. Its streets hum with I'm quoting the article now. Its streets hum with supersized cars and its skyline bristles with cranes. Its mayor was the former chief executive of Pizza Hut. Hundreds of multinational corporations have chosen Dallas for their headquarters, most recently Jacobs Engineering, which is moving to low-tax Texas from pricey Pasadena, California, touching on another subject we've talked about in terms of the attractiveness of places like Dallas to companies that have been trying to make a go of it in other states where it's a lot more expensive to do business. So what's the problem? What is it that has got sort of a financial gun to the head of the city of Dallas? Well, it's the city's pension fund for its police officers and firefighters, now nearing collapse and seeking an immense bailout. Over recent weeks, panicked Dallas retirees have pulled $220 million out of the fund. Now, let's understand how retirement works, right? Particularly when you have a pension. Most of you don't have a pension. Typically, the folks who have a pension work for one employer, and that's the government. You don't get pensions typically within other disciplines. They're usually not there. And pensions can be problematic. And a lot of people that I've talked to and articles I've read kind of refer to them as a pyramid scheme that's just made okay by the negotiation process, I guess, between unions for various government entities and the folks who work for them. And it's based on this idea that the folks who are currently paying into the pension who are working are supporting the folks who have retired. Well, of course, as the number of folks who retire swell and take their pension, that puts a lot of stress on the potential ability of those who contribute. But then also, if the money is invested poorly, well, then you can see what might happen there. You might end up in a situation where you're simply not getting enough money rolling around in the pension to handle the demands of those who are in retirement and taking their pension. Now, the other side of this equation is that when you do take your retirement and get your pension, you have two options. You can take it as a monthly payment and a check you get in the mail every month, or you can take it in a lump sum. Now, of course, not taking it as a lump sum is preferred. So over time, you're actually going to get more if you do the monthly draw from the pension. But because of the problems they've been experiencing, most of these Dallas retirees have been pulling out their lump sums instead of taking payments over time. According to this article, what set off the run was a recommendation in July that retirees no longer be allowed to take out big blocks of money. Even before that, though, there were reports that the fund's investments, some placed in highly risky and speculative ventures, were worth less than previously stated. What is happening in Dallas is an extreme example of what's happening in many other places around the country. Elected officials promised workers solid pensions years ago on the basis of wishful thinking rather than realistic expectations. Now, this is all from the New York Times. Dallas's troubles have become more urgent because its plan rules let some retirees take big withdrawals. Now, the Dallas Police and Fire Pension System has asked the city for a one-time infusion of $1.1 billion, an amount roughly equal to Dallas's entire general fund, but not even close to what the pension fund needs to be fully funded. Nothing would be left for fighting endemic poverty south of the Trinity River, for public libraries, or for giving current police officers and firefighters a raise. According to to some testimony at the Texas Pension Review Board, that's a ridiculous request. The mayor, who defeated a former Dallas police chief to win his office in 2011, added that he had nothing but respect for the city's uniformed safety workers, 5 of whom were gunned down by a deranged sniper during a protest against police shootings in July. But that does not change the awful numbers. This month, Moody's reported that Dallas was struggling with more pension debt relative to its resources than any major American city except Chicago. And we mentioned Chicago a minute ago. Quote, the city of Dallas has no way to pay this, said Lee Kleinman, a city council member who served as a pension trustee from 2013 until this year. If the city had to pay the whole thing, we would declare bankruptcy. Now, this goes on and talks about it a bit more, but this is a big deal. And what's also interesting about this is one reason why this is so concerning is because of the types of things that pensions tend to invest in. And this is something I hadn't really thought to the next step. Right now, we've talked about bonds. We've talked about a variety of different things and how the performance, for instance, of 10-year treasury, for instance, is linked with what you're going to pay in terms of interest rates on your loans, right? Well, it's instruments similar to that a lot of these various pensions have invested in. Well, and with very little growth, with very little dividends being paid, this is money that's not really making what they need to make. Now, some numbers that I pulled up when I did some searching off of the internet was that most of these needed to earn 8 or 9% annually in order for them to really be able to meet their needs. And they have simply just not been able to do that. To many in Dallas, the hole in the pension fund seems to have blown open overnight. But in fact, the fuse was lit back in 1993 when state lawmakers sweetened police and firefighter pensions beyond the wildest dreams of the typical Dallas resident. They added individual savings accounts paying 8.5% interest per year when workers reached the normal retirement age, then 50. The goal was to keep seasoned veterans on the force longer. Guaranteed 8.5% interest on tap indefinitely for thousands of people would, of course, cost a fortune, but state lawmakers made it look cost neutral. Records show by fixing Dallas's annual pension contributions at 36% of the police and firefighters' payroll, it would all work as long as the payroll grew by 5% every year, which it didn't. And if the pension fund earned 9% annually on its investments. So that sort of sets the stage for this. Now, we're obviously here talking specifically about Dallas, but what's particularly interesting is this is not a horribly unique situation. So why are we not seeing more of this happening in other areas across the country? Because Dallas accelerated their process by some pretty bizarre local investments in real estate that were clearly overvalued. Now, you can have plenty of arguments about whether or not there was any kind of corruption involved or other types of funky stuff. But the reality is that no matter how you slice it, and if you had an actuary come in and just analyze these things, it's not a sustainable model. So think of Dallas less as a unique example of what can happen to a pension and more of a warning of what's coming, simply because they had a situation where they were doing it very similar to a lot of other pensions nationwide, but then they had these additional things that are actually still being investigated and argued over in terms of various investments and other types of things relating to real estate. But that only really accelerated a process that's sort of already happening in other areas. So how big is this potential problem? Now, as I mentioned, if you work in the public sector, if you work for a government or anything like that, something in the neighborhood of 78% of those folks have some sort of a pension plan. If you look at it more broadly in terms of the population in general, it's 48% of the population, or about half of retirees, say that their pension plans represent a major source of retirement income. So that's a lot of folks. That's nearly half. I've seen other numbers that indicate that over the longer term, because this number actually comes to me from U.S. News from July of 2015. And I've seen other numbers that are a little bit less than that, but still substantial chunks of the population. And the concern is, if this starts to implode, it has a dramatic effect. Now, granted, it has a dramatic effect on folks at the higher end in terms of age, folks that are in their retirement-oriented years. But this represents, I think, something worth keeping an eye on. Dallas, I think, is just sort of that first canary in the coal mine because they had other things accelerating this problem. But so much of what pension funds rely on have simply not been performing to the level to sustain their numbers. And it's a huge deal. And once you actually start looking into it, if you go onto Google, for instance, and Google the word pension bubble, you quickly discover there's a cottage industry of folks out there that are doing nothing but talking about what's happening with pensions and what a huge bubble is being created in terms of the pension. Now, if you want to go to Wikipedia, you can do pension crisis. You can go to a site called Pension Tsunami. There are an awful lot of folks out there talking about this, whether you want to talk about Sprott money or you want to talk about Reuters or Zero Hedge. There is a whole lot of news out there, and I'll put a few links up in the show notes of today's show for you to pay attention to this issue. And the reason I bring this up isn't so much that I have a solution or I have a strategy or anything that I would think that you could do as a response to it, but it's absolutely something that could play into a huge portion of the consuming public in terms of what their financial situation is. I don't know if it equates to some sort of bailout thing, because that seems like the most logical thing. It seems to me that what would most likely happen would be a reform where pensions are gotten rid of, and all folks starting from now on who are currently employed aren't going to get their pension, but what they've been contributing gets transitioned into some other retirement mechanism, which could dramatically affect their ability to save money for retirement. But then that's going to be linked with some sort of huge lump sum payment that a city is going to have a hard time paying. It represents a huge amount of money, a potentially gigantic problem, and makes me wonder how do we respond to that as folks who are going to be members of these communities, particularly if one of the solutions is a reduction in benefits. What do folks do in those cases? Does that mean these folks sell properties they may currently be living in to look for less expensive accommodations? It's a thorny problem, and it's going to require a lot of different solutions at a lot of different levels that go way beyond funding anything. It doesn't even seem realistic that you could fund the current pension demands, at least in Dallas, completely. It doesn't look like you could do 100% funding of that stuff. So something's got to give. And typically when things like that give, there need to be a lot of responses from the community in order to fulfill needs that folks are going to have. And one of them may be being someone who's providing rental homes for folks that are in that retirement stage of life that are going to be affected by something like this. It's absolutely something to keep your eye on. So I wanted to point that one out to you. We're going to go ahead and talk about something else for the rest of the show, but we're going to take a break right here. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Are you ready to jump in and start your search for your first investment property? Maybe you've decided that it's time to own your own home, or maybe you're ready to sell your home and move on to something new. No matter what your goal is, the Rebel Broker can help. That's right, aside from hosting this show, I am also the owner, broker of Whitelaw & Sons Real Estate Services right here in Silicon Valley. With over 25 years experience serving Silicon Valley, Morgan Hill, San Martin, and Gilroy, I or one of my great agents can help you achieve your goals in real estate. So if you're ready to look into taking that next step towards achieving your real estate goals, point your browser at www.soldbyrobert.com. That's www.soldbyrobert.com and get in touch. Let me show you how I will earn your business and your respect. Again, that's www.soldbyrobert.com, or you can call me at 408-852-0525. California Bureau of Real Estate ID 00984-909. Welcome back, everyone. We just wrapped up a discussion of some pretty scary data relating to pensions, where they might go, and the very valid concerns of folks who are maybe just a couple of years away from taking their pensions or are there now and are really opting for that lump sum withdrawal of money to try and get what they can before this pension system sort of collapses on itself. Absolutely something to keep an eye on. I'm not really sure how we respond to it as real estate investors, aside from being there to satisfy what is likely to be changed needs of folks at the retirement end of the spectrum. We've already done some shows on the different ways we can cater to folks at that point in their lives, at that sort of retirement age. And if they do start to see a reduction in their benefits, That's absolutely something that's going to probably cause a lot of these folks to consider liquidating property, taking some of that money, buying something less expensive, and then trying to use that money to kind of bolster their savings for their retirement years. Another thing I wanted to cover was out-of-state investors, and I don't by that I don't mean out of the country, but states in the United States where folks own investment properties, but they're from somewhere else. It was kind of an interesting topic. It also includes in this article an interactive map where you can get an idea of this data from different states. So, for instance, if you go to any state on the map, you can hover over it, and it'll give you a number that represents the number of single-family investment homes. So one cool thing right off the bat, and what we're going to do first, or what we're going to do next after we look at this map in general, is focus on just the top 10 states with the highest level of investments and where the most out-of-staters are. So in other words, if I'm in California and there's X number of single-family investment homes, the largest single group of investors in those properties are from what state? So it kind of gives you an interesting idea of the cross-pollination that's happening between different states in terms of what folks from other states are owning in other states in the country. Now, the first piece of information you can pull from this map in terms of the interactive part is just get an idea of how many single-family investment homes are actually in each one of these states. Now, for instance, in North Dakota, there's only 3,629 single-family investment homes, which kind of strikes me as an exceptionally low number. And then you go to Arizona, and that number is 162,069. And then if you go over to California, it's 117,139. So kind of an interesting way to look at the map, get an idea of the distribution of where states are in terms of how many single-family investment homes that they have in each one of those states. So let's go ahead and jump in and start with our top 10 list that is with the most investment homes owned by out-of-state investors, where those investors are from, and if the state, well, I know that's really actually unimportant to me. They want to do some sort of a political view on this, and I really don't think that's horribly helpful. Although it is interesting that in the top 10, only 2 of them are blue states and the rest of them are red states. Now, number 10 on our list kind of blows me away. We've talked about this state before in terms of it having extremely high taxes, and also in terms, last year, it was the number 1 most moved out of state. When we were talking about migration numbers this time last year, this is the state everyone was moving out of, according to various moving truck companies. And of course, that's New Jersey. They have single-family investment homes totaling 108,919. Interestingly enough, where out-of-state investors are from, Pennsylvania, with 42,361 homes owned in New Jersey as investments by folks in Pennsylvania. Number 9 on the list, Pennsylvania. Single-family investment homes total 113,070. Most of the out-of-state investors are from New York, and they hold 24,699 homes in Pennsylvania. Number 8 on the list is Michigan, where they have single-family investment homes totaling 116,137. And the state with the largest number of out-of-state holders of those investment properties is Illinois, with 22,271 homes. Next on the list, number 7, this one's kind of interesting, and I think it makes sense given some of the data we've talked about before relating to high-tech companies that have moved out and sort of explaining the trend. Number 7 is California. Single-family investment homes totaling 117,139. Where out-of-state investors are from, or the largest block of out-of-state investors, is Texas with 15,534. Now, what's interesting is keep in mind that while that's an awful lot of single-family investment homes as a percentage, it's ridiculously small. Pennsylvania had 42,000 out of 108,000 for New Jersey, which represented a little bit under half. So this is they're not leading the way by a whole lot. It wouldn't surprise me to discover that Portland, excuse me, not Portland, but just the state of Oregon, perhaps Washington, are probably also pretty high on this list. But given the amount of migration that we've had to places like Austin, Texas from California, it wouldn't surprise me if folks are keeping their California properties and renting them when they go off to Texas. Number 6 on our list, Texas. Single-family investment homes total 139,358. And not too surprisingly, the largest number of out-of-state investors are from California, 51,069. So by a pretty good margin, there are a lot more folks owning properties in California, or a lot of Californians owning Texas properties than there are Texans owning California properties. Number 5 on our list is Georgia. Single-family investment homes total 159,899. The largest block of out-of-state investors comes from Florida, where they hold 39,691 of the homes that are investment properties in Georgia. Number 4 on the list. This actually, guys, I'm kind of surprised about that, California being at number 7. Number 4 on our list is Arizona. Single-family investment homes, 162,069. Again, California is where the largest number of out-of-state investors live, with 55,822 of those homes being held by Californians. Number 3, and this one kind of blows me away, Tennessee. I guess it doesn't blow me away that Tennessee's on this list. We've already talked about Tennessee. We've talked about Memphis, Chattanooga, a variety of different places in Tennessee that have shown up on a number of different lists in terms of their attractiveness for investment. So that doesn't surprise me horribly. But they've got 185,116 homes as single-family investment properties. And Florida is where the largest block of out-of-state investors are, where they hold 40,000 of the Tennessee homes. Not real sure why that would be. I'm trying to think of a logical reason why there'd be that connection between Florida and Tennessee, and I'm coming up blank. Number 2 on our list, North Carolina. Single-family investment homes total 202,431. That's kind of an interesting number, simply because when you think about the population of a place like North Carolina versus the population of a place like California, how do they manage to have something in the neighborhood of 80,000 more single-family investment homes in North Carolina? That'd be an interesting thing to look into. Most out-of-state investors that hold property in North Carolina, the largest block is again from Florida. Man, those Floridans, they're everywhere. Tennessee, North Carolina, Georgia, is 38,045 out of that 202,000 number. And then number 1 on our list is Florida, maybe not surprisingly. Single-family investment homes, 365,959 total, which is nuts. Most of the out-of-state investors are from New York, with 51,967 homes held by folks living in New York that are located in Florida. What's interesting, if you take this data as a whole, that's about 16% of all single-family investment homes are owned by out-of-state investors. And, I bring this up primarily because there are so many folks that I talk to that are very hesitant to get involved with investing in properties out of their state. And I don't think that that's something that you need to particularly worry about. There are plenty of folks clearly here from these numbers that are making that work. If you approach it, and I'm also going to say this, it's going to depend on what kind of property you have. We've had these conversations before where sort of through my process of really discovery on vacation rentals, I really had not been involved too much with vacation rentals until I got my own. And the huge difference it made for me was that I did the vast majority of the managing of it. And it's one of the big lessons actually I learned this year, and to one I shared as soon as I figured it out, simply because there was absolutely no question that the difference was my more hands-on approach to managing that property. No one is more motivated to get my property rented than me. And I actually think that from a vacation rental standpoint, the competition that you're facing with property managers who are supposed to be renting your property, the fact that they are, because of a financial incentive, going to want to rent more expensive properties than yours first. And of course, they're going to want to rent their own properties first. And next, if they have more lucrative percentage agreements with other property owners, they're going to want to rent those first. So you might be 4th, 5th, maybe even 6th on the list of properties that they consider, because the bottom line is they're focusing on their bottom line, not your bottom line. And in my case, it couldn't have been more obvious. When my parents tried to do the exact same thing in the 90s, they were vacant the vast majority of the time. And now I've completely switched that around by being more hands-on myself, to the point where my vacancy rate is ridiculously low. It's literally a handful of days every month. And I think, so much of your success is going to be hinging on your willingness to jump in and tackle some of the things that might stand in your way. Now, I don't think it's as much of an issue. And after saying that, you'd think I'd now say, oh, well, yeah, you don't, this is how you want to do this. But I don't think it's as big of an issue when you're doing non-vacation rentals. If you're doing month to month or leases for a year at a time or 2 years at a time, I honestly don't think it's as much of an issue. I think it's a little bit more of a niche around your vacation rentals. So take this perhaps as inspiration. Maybe you are someone who lives in one of these states where they're holding property in other states, and maybe that's something that's going to encourage you to consider doing the same thing yourself. I strongly encourage you to consider it. I don't see any huge downside to it as far as being a single-family residential home that's rented as a residence. Again, I think that there's built-in reasons for you to want to manage it more directly yourself if you are doing a vacation rental. But jump in and take a look at these. See if what these communities represent to you in terms of your level of interest. And granted, these are large-scale state references. But if you've thought about jumping in, take a look at these, figure out what the barriers to entry are, and see if those fit with your plan or your ability. I encourage folks to look into other states, not just for the joy of going to another state, but because a lot of my folks in California simply can't afford to jump in and get an investment going because of how prohibitively expensive some of these areas are. So by changing their gaze to areas that are less expensive, they're able to find opportunities that'll let them at least get started. All right, folks, as always, I certainly appreciate you spending your valuable time with me. I hope that through this show, I'm able to give you a few great things to think about, so it's a valuable use of your time. As always, thanks for listening, everybody, and I'll talk to y'all next time.